Alright, so today we're going to be reading chapters 5 through 8 in Freak the Mighty. If you want to go ahead and pull up the PDF that I posted a couple days ago on Google Classroom and follow along, or you can follow along on this video. After this, you are going to be taking a quiz that was very similar to the chapters 1 through 4, where there will be a few comprehension questions as well as a few figurative language questions. Okay, so you really want to be able to follow along, that way you know what's going on. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 5, Spitting Image. There's a place I go inside my head sometimes. It's cool and dim in there, and you float like a cloud. No, you are a cloud. The kind you see in the sky on a windy day, the way they keep changing shape, except you can't really see it changing. It just sort of happens, and suddenly you realize the cloud that looks like a big hand with fat fingers now looks like a catcher's mitt, or a big soft TV set, like that. Anyhow, I went there right after the fair Gwen ran off with that look on her face like, what is he doing with my poor little boy? Stealing him away in the wagon? What I do is lie on the floor under my bed, where you can just barely see the bed springs and stuff because it's so dark. And before long, I'm somewhere else sort of floating, and it's so cool and empty in there, you don't have to think about anything. You're nothing. You're nobody. Nothing matters. You're not even there. Time out. Except this time, I can't stay as long as I'd like, because Graham is knocking on the door, going, Maxwell, Max, are you there? Please answer me, dear, it's important. Yeah, right. But I wedge out from under the bed, there's getting to be less and less room under there, and I dust myself off and open the door. There's no lock, but Graham has this thing about waiting until I say come in. She makes a big deal about not intruding. Maxwell, she says, and takes a little step inside the room, and you can tell she'd rather not be here. She makes this face because the place is dark and messy, and probably it smells like my socks or whatever. Max, dear, I'm sorry to bother you. You know I never come into the basement. But I just got a call from Gwen Avery, and I think it's important. Uh-oh, I'm thinking. Now the fair Gwen is calling up my Graham, probably to report a great hulking beast that lives in the cellar. And I close up inside, waiting for the worst. She called to say how sorry she was, Graham is saying. Huh? Well, I guess she came to pick up her little boy. Is that right? You and Kevin were making friends? Making friends? What a wet idea that is. But Graham gets her feelings hurt pretty easy, so I don't actually say that. What I say is, yeah, I guess so. Graham is uneasy. I can see her eyes flitting nervously around the room, like she's crossing the border into really foreign country. This is as good a place as any to mention that even though Graham is my grandmother, she doesn't look like a granny. She looks more like a mother because she was, as she always says, a mere child myself when my real mother was born. Well, I get the impression poor Gwen wasn't expecting to see you looking so big, and now she thinks she's offended you. Does that make any sense? I guess so. You know her, huh? Oh my, yes, says Graham. Gwen was a good friend of your mother's. They were both pregnant at the same time. Then later on, you and little Kevin went to the same daycare. Did you know that? I give a shrug because I don't really like Graham to know how much I remember about way back then. Graham is saying, she said she especially wanted me to tell you this, Max. She said she's delighted that you and Kevin are going to be friends. That's the word she used. Delighted. And she's inviting you to supper. First thing, without thinking, I say, do I have to? Graham reaches out and she puts her hand on my shoulder, real light and feathery. You can feel how nervous she is just to touch me, and how it makes her uncomfortable to have to look up at me. Because, did I mention I'm a lot bigger than Graham? Bigger than Graham, too? Bigger than most people? It's true. Graham says, she feels bad about how she treated you, Maxwell, dear, and she wants to make it up to you. You don't have to go, but it would be the right thing to do. It was no big deal, I say. She just ran away is all. I guess I scared her. It wasn't you, Graham said. No. Then who was it scared her? Now she's got her tongue stuck, and you can see her swallowing in her throat like her mouth is dry. I'll just leave that to Gwen, she says. She's quite a remarkable young woman, you know, raising that poor boy all on her own. He's not a poor boy, I say. You should hear him talk. I think the rest of him is so small because his brain is so big. Yes, says Graham. Well, well. Graham is always saying that. Well, well, like it means something, which I guess it does to her. Anyhow, I agree to have supper with Freak and his mom, even though the idea of it makes me feel tensed up, like there's a hand inside my stomach and the hand is, making a fist. It turns out to be not so bad. The fair Gwen, right away she's beaming at me, bouncing around the kitchen and talking a mile a minute, so fast the words kind of smush together. So did Susan excuse me, your grandmother, or mention your mom and I were pals, this? Until she got married, excuse me, I never could abide that. Man, I always thought that she was crazy and scary. Is it okay to say that to you? Won't be offended. It's like this delay while I try to sort it all out. And then I go, yeah, Graham told me. And the stuff about her knowing my father and thinking he was sick in the head, I decide no comment is the way to go. You are the cutest little baby, Gwen says. I remember like it was yesterday. We were all of us living over in the tenements in those days because the rent was so cheap and we were all just starting out. Freak is on the floor digging through the packing boxes for pots and pans and stuff. He's almost inside this box. All you can see is his funny little rear end sticking out. You'd think he was maybe 2 years old. That's how small he is, until you notice where his leg brace makes a lump in his pants. From inside the box he goes, Hey Gwen, leave the guy alone, huh? You're going spastic. Am I? Gwen asks. She's at the counter going through drawers looking for spoons or whatever. Sorry, Max. That is, I'm sorry we got off on the wrong foot. It's just, Freak's head pops out of the box, and he's got this wicked know-it-all grin. What she means is you're a spitting image of your old man. Gwen says, Kevin, please. And her voice is real small, like she's embarrassed. Yeah, I say, everybody says that. They do? I shrug. Is it really such a big deal for a boy to look like his father? Which is typical butthead thinking, because of course it's a big deal if your father happens to be in prison, which everybody in town knows about. It's not like there's any secret about what he did or why he's there, except everybody acts like it should be a secret. And the bigger I grow and the more I look like my old man, the worse it gets. You really knew him? I say. I mean, him and my mom when they were together. Not very well, Gwen says. She's looking for a knife to slice open a pack of hot dogs. I never saw much of your mom after they got married. He made it difficult for your mother to have any friends. There's a knife on the table and I pick it up and hand it to the fair Gwen. She doesn't flinch away and I decide she's okay. She's really pretty cool. So, Freak is saying, when do we eat? My fuel cells are depleted. Supper is great. The fair Gwen makes this really tasty potato salad with spices and stuff. Way better than the mushy stuff Graham makes. And we have hot dogs fried in a pan with the buns toasted up buttercrisp, just the way I like. And 2 kinds of relish and 3 kinds of mustard, a red onions cut up real small. We sit on the backyard eating from paper plates, and Freak tells robot stories that are so strange and funny, I'm laughing like a maniac, and then I'm choking and Freak is pounding me on the back. Expel the object, Freak shouts. Regurgitate, you big moron. And he gives me another thump and I cough up this yucky mess. But I'm still laughing so hard my nose is running. What a goon, except it really is funny. Me trying to sneeze a hot dog through my nose, and we're both laughing like total morons. This is great, Gwen says, looking at Freak and me. I'm so glad we decided to move back, I feel like we're all getting a fresh start. It's time to go home. Graham gets nervous if I'm not back before dark. Everything seems really great, just like Gwen says. Except when I lie down on my bed, it hits me, boom, and I'm crying like a baby. And the really weird thing is that I'm happy. Chapter 6. Close Encounter of the Turd Kind. 4th of July, right? Everybody goes nuts. The dads are getting drunk and having their cookouts, and the moms are trying to keep all the brats from blowing their precious little pinkies off the cherry bombs. And the kids are running wild through the backyards. It's like no rules apply, and that makes everything real edgy, if you know what I mean. Like, let's have a blast, and who cares what happens? Don't get the wrong idea. I love the 4th. It's just that people tend to get all choked up about firecracker holidays, and they don't see what's really going on. Which, like I say, is the dad swilling beer and acting numb. That's the basic formula. Not that Grim ever swills anything stronger than root beer. No way. The poison never crossed his lips, he likes to say, even though I've seen a picture of him in the army, and that sure looks like a bottle of beer in his hand, and he's got that same whacked by a hammer grin that dudes always get when they're drinking. Anyhow, this is the first year I get to go to the fireworks without Grim and Graham, which I've never understood because it's right down by the mill pond where I've been allowed to go for years. So why should it make a difference just because about 1 million people show up to watch the rockets' red glare over that smelly pond? The deal this year is that I get to go with Freak, which Graham thinks is a good idea because she's afraid he'll get crushed up or something. She's actually thinks people are going to step on him, which just goes to show how brainless she can be sometimes, and scared of everything. I mean, nobody steps on little kids down there, so why should they step on Freak? Turns out the thing to worry about is not kid stompers, but beer swillers, like I mentioned before. Because Freak and I are still a couple of blocks from the pond, just kind of easing our way along when these punks start mouthing off. Hey you, Mutt and Jeff, Frankenstein and Igor. Don't look around, I'm talking to you, boneheads. What is this, a freak show? I know that voice. Tony D, they call him, Blade. He's at least 17 and he's already been to juvie court 4 times. I heard he cut a guy with a razor. He almost died. And everybody says the best way to handle Tony D and his gang is you avoid them. Cross the street, hide, whatever it takes. Yeah, you, he goes. And he's doing his hip-pitty walk, strutting along. He's got these fancy cool cowboy boots with metal toes. Yeah, Andre the Giant and the Dwarf. Hold on a sec, I want a word with you. Only the way he talks. He goes, I want a word with ya. Except it's bad enough to have to listen to the creep. I don't want to have to spell the dumb way he talks. Anyhow, big mistake. We stop and wait for Tony D, Elias, the Bad News Blade. Got any dudes? He asks, pretending like he's friendly. He's a couple feet away, but you can smell the beer on his breath. Also, it smells like he ate something dead. For instance, roadkill, but maybe that's just my imagination. Pay attention, Tony D says. I asked, did you got any? Freak, his chest all puffed out and his chin looks hard, and he's looking right up at Tony D and says, got any what? Tony D has his hands on his hips and his punkster pals are trying to get closer, working through the crowd. He leans over Freak and he says, boomers, you little freak. M80s. Maybe a rack of cherry bombs? Is that what's making a lumping in your pocket, huh? Freak starts to hump himself away, trying to walk faster than he really can, which makes his leg brace bump against the ground. Come along, Maxwell, he says over his shoulder. Ignore the cretin. Blade goes, hey, what? And moves right in front of Freak. Want to say that again, little freak man? Freak says, cretin, C-R-E-T-I-N, defined as one who suffers from a mental deficiency. Hearing how little tiny Freak is dissing the fearsome Tony D, Elias Blade, I can't help it. I laugh out loud. Tony D is looking up at me and he's showing his white teeth. I swear they've been sharpened to look like vampire teeth. And I go, uh-oh, and start to get real cold inside. Real icy, because I can see that Blade is trying to make up his mind. Is he going to fight me, or is he just going to kill me quick? Just then, I hear the whoop of a siren, and like a miracle, this cop car comes out of nowhere, heading for the mill pond, and Blade takes one look, and he and his punksters are out of there, burning rubber in their Reeboks. Freak goes, phew, that was a close encounter of the turd kind. And it takes me a second to get the joke. But then I'm laughing, amazed he can be so cool about it. Like it was no big deal that Tony D was just after us. You can take him, right? He asks a couple minutes later. I go, are you kidding? You can't just fight Blade. You have to fight his gang, too. You mean, you couldn't take him? And I was giving him lip? That's about the size of it. Freak goes, oh my God. And he's shrieking and laughing and whooping it up so loud that everybody is looking at us like we're total goons, which isn't far from the truth. Freak hasn't got his crutch tonight, just the leg brace, and he's laughing so hard he falls down. Not that he has far to go. Anyhow, I pick him up and I'm amazed how light he is, like it's nothing for me to lift him. And maybe that's where I get the idea. Because later, when we're down by the pond and the first of the rockets is shrieking up, 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 Freak is making a fuss because he can't see. There are so many people crowded around, all he can see are feet and knees, and people are lifting their little kids up to see the fireworks explode like hot pink flowers in the sky. And so I just sort of reach down without thinking and pick up Freak and set him on my shoulders. He's kind of trembly up there until he grabs hold of my hair to steady himself, and then the first really big rocket whams off, a humongous thud. I can feel in my stomach, and Freak is shouting, "All right!" And I know it's okay. He's not flipped out because I picked him up and put him on my shoulders like he was a little kid, instead of possibly the smartest human being in the whole world. "Magnesium!" he shouts as the white sparkles glitter down over the pond. "Potassium chlorate!" as the shells go womp, womp, womp. And everybody goes, "Ooh." "Potassium nitrate, sulfur, aluminum." And after a burst of hot red fire in the sky, Freak tugs my hair and screams, "Copper! That's copper powder combusting with oxygen." And when the fire blossoms are flashing blue, he goes, "Good old strontium nitrate." And I'm thinking, whoa, is there anything this little dude doesn't know? At the end, like always, they give a thing they call the grand finale. And when they just go nuts and light off everything at once, and it sounds like World War II, whizzing and banging and popping, and there's so much hot stuff falling from the sky you can hear it sizzling in the pond. Freak keeps on shouting out the names of chemicals and elements until the last spark dies in the scummy pond, and the crowd cheers, and then everybody tries to leave at once, like a bunch of morons. Chapter 7, Walking High Above the World. You ever notice how the smell of gunpowder makes you thirsty? Because after the fireworks, I'm aiming us for where the food carts are parked along the street, thinking about an ice-cold lemonade, how clean it will taste. And for a moment, I almost forget that Freak is riding on my shoulders. "Amazing perspective up here," he says. "This is what you see all the time." "I'm not that big," I say. "This way you're like 2 feet taller than me." "Cool," he says. "I love it." We're working our way through the crowd, and we're almost to the food carts when Freak tugs on my hair. "Cretin at 2 o'clock, he says, real urgent. 2 more at 3 o'clock. I go, "Huh? What?" "The Blade and his gang," Freak hisses. "They've locked onto us. Their trajectory is converging. Go to the left," he says. "Make it quick if you want to live." Too bad I'm a little confused about rights and lefts. If I don't think about it, I know, but if I have to think about it quick, my mind goes blank. Right, left, what does it all mean? "Left," Freak says, and he kicks me with his little foot like he's digging into a horse, and it clicks in my head. "Go that way, follow the feet." "Faster," Freak is saying, and he's urging me on. It's lucky for me the little dude doesn't have any spurs, but I don't care, I just want to get clear of Blade. "Warp factor 9, Freak is shouting. "More speed, oh mighty beast." Now I'm running at a full gallop, weaving through the crowd, and I don't even need to look back. All I have to do is follow the way Freak is kicking his feet, steering me. I'm pretty sure we're getting away until this punk comes out of nowhere. He's one of Blade's gang, and he's got a big, ugly grin. "Over here, Tony. Got him cornered." "What do?" I say to Freak. He goes, I'm thinking. I can hear Blade before I can see him. Hear his wicked laugh, so mean and dirty it makes my stomach freeze up and my knees feel squishy. "You, the Freak. You and the giant retard. I'll cut you down to size. Dice and slice, baby. Freak showtime." And now I can see him. See that pointed white grin and his eyes so dark and cruel. And he's swaggering through the crowd. He's got us surrounded with punks. Everywhere I turn, there's another mean face trying to look as tough as Tony D. In a small voice, I say, "Tell me what to do." And Freak pats me on the shoulder and says, "Just give me a nanosecond to process the alternatives." "Slice and dice." That's Blade, and he's reaching into his back pocket. "Make it quick," I hiss. And then Freak is kicking my right shoulder, and I turn that way, and he's saying, "Go, go!" And I run right over this punk. He's so surprised he loses his bubble gum, and he tries to grab my leg. But I kick free, and I'm running right and then left, running blind. and just letting Freak decide which way we should go, because he must have a plan, a dude as smart as that. Which I'm right about, he does have a plan. Only the plan is to run out into the smelly mole pond and drown us both. Go on, he's shouting from up above my head. Trust me, we'll be okay. Blade is shouting too, and I can hear his feet pitter-pattering behind me, catching up. Warp speed, Freak is shouting, and he's kicking with both feet now, which means go straight. Head for the H2O! The pond is right ahead of me, and I'm sort of running along the edge, crunching over the bottles and cans and candy wrappers, and then I hear the zingy sound, and I just know that Blade is swinging a knife, cutting the air right behind us, and there's nowhere to go but into the pond, like Freak wants me to. I almost lose it right there, taking that first step because it's a gunky pond and the mud is really oozy and deep and it sucks right up to my knees. But I'm so scared of getting cut by Tony D, so scared he might bite me with those wicked teeth, I just keep going. There's this great ugly sucking sound as my feet come back up out of the mud, and I stretch out as far as my legs will go, and I take another step, and I just keep going. I'm going so fast that the water is up to my chest before Freak gets my attention. He's tugging at my hair with slow hands. Whoa, he's saying, slow up, we did it. The mud is up around my knees, and it's real hard to turn around. Finally, I gets on facing back at the shore, and there's Blade, just his head above the water, and he looks all white and scared. Help, he's blubbering, choking on that dirty water, and then his punksters are splashing in to rescue him. Man, they can hardly get him loose, the way he's stuck deep in that mud. And before they drag him to shore, they're all covered with slime and mud. They're gasping like fish, almost too tired to cuss us out, but that doesn't last. Blade is covered with mud right up to his neck, which on him looks natural. He turns to his gang, who looks as slimy as he does. Get some rocks, it's target practice time. What do we do now? I ask, because the mud is still sucking me down. It's over my knees now, and the water is right up under my arms, and even Freak's feet are getting wet. Wait, Freak says. The cavalry is coming. Can't you hear that bugle? I'm listening, but I can't hear anything except for Blade and his gang, and now they're scrambling around trying to find some rocks to heave at us. I can see Blade rearing back to throw, and the first one misses us. Can you move? Freak says. I don't think so. It's true. The mud is up over my knees, and I'm locked in place. I can't even fall down, that's how stiff it is. I'm like a big fence post, and everybody knows a fence post makes a good target. More splashes as the rocks fall short. At first, they're throwing stuff that's too heavy. Pretty soon, they smarten up, and Blade says, Smaller rocks! Give me smaller rocks! And I know in my heart we're doomed. Then up above me, there's this really loud, high-pitched screech. Freak has his fingers in his mouth, and he's whistling. Real shrill and shivery, and so loud it almost hurts my ears. And then I see what Freak has been seeing all along. A cop car cruising real slow along the road around the pond, which is what they always do after the fireworks. Freak is whistling, and the cop car spotlight comes beaming around the pond until it settles on us. I'm blinking because the light is so bright, and Freak is making a fuss and waving his arms, and we hear the metal megaphone sound of a cop voice ordering us not to move. Like we could, even if we wanted. It's hard to see in the glare of the spotlight, but Freak tells that Blade and his punks are running away. Like snakes on sneakers, Freak says. Officers! Freak is shouting into the white light. We request assistance! They finally have to use ropes to pull me out of there. Freak won't let go. He stays right where he is on top of my shoulders, even when this cop in a boat tries to lift him off. And then we're up on the bank of the pond, and everybody is being real nice and giving us blankets and cokes and saying they know all about Tony D. They'll keep an eye on him, don't you worry. Okay, boys, you better give us your names and we'll call your mothers. This one cop is saying, and there's this other guy who is looking at me funny, and he says, Hey, isn't that Kenny Kane's boy? Must be. Old Killer Kane. Is he still inside? Freak is holding tight to my shoulders, and when they ask him for his name, he says, We're Freak the Mighty. That's who we are. We're 9 feet tall, in case you haven't noticed. And that's how it all started, really. How we got to be Freak the Mighty, slaying dragons and fools, and walking high above the world. Chapter 8, Dinosaur Brain. It turned out to be a cool summer. I feared we'd get in trouble for running into the pond. It looked bad for a while when the cops drove us home, and I got all the soaking wet and covered in gook. And when Grim was hosing me down, he had this really pruny look on his face. But he was smelling something bad. But the cops made it out like I was a hero or something, rescuing the poor crippled midget kid. So Grim listens to the cops and then he gives me this weird look, like, imagine my surprise. And he goes in the house and then Graham comes running out in her nightgown with this big fluffy towel and she really makes a fuss. Me rescuing Freak. What a joke, right? Except that's how it must have looked from a distance, because they never knew it was Freak who rescued me, or his genius brain and my big dumb body. Graham is there rubbing me with the towel and her hands are shaking and she's saying, "Oh, I saw those blue lights and I thought the worst." And Grim is behind her looking at me real intense and shaking his head and he's saying, "Who'da thunk it, Mabel?" Which is some kind of joke because Graham's name isn't Mabel. Anyhow, they take me inside and the first thing Graham does is give me a bowl of ice cream. And Grim, he keeps shaking his head and goes, "What this young man needs is a cup of coffee. Real coffee." And then he gets busy putting the filter in the machine and measuring out the coffee and standing by while it drips through. And he's got this stern look like he is thinking deep thoughts. By the time I polish off the ice cream, Grim is handing me a coffee in a china cup from the set they never use. He gives me that cup like it's a really big deal, maybe because I'm not allowed to drink coffee yet. And he's so grim-like and serious I open my mouth to say, "What's the big deal? You really think this is my first cup of coffee?" "Yeah, right." And something happens and the words come out. "Thank you, sir." And it's like I'm possessed or something. I have no idea where the things I'm saying are coming from or why. I go, "Thanks for the towel, Graham, and the ice cream. Could I have some sugar in the coffee? 2 teaspoons, please." And Graham claps his hands together and he says, "Of course you can, son." And it's like, whoa, because he never calls me that. Always Max or Maxwell or that boy. Next thing, he's clearing his throat and coughing into his fist, and Graham is looking at the two of us, and she gets that Graham-like glow, like, this is how it's supposed to be, the way things always happen on The Wonder Years, with the family getting all gooey and sentimental about some numb thing the bratty kid did while he's having all his wonderful years or whatever. Graham says, "I want you to promise me something, Maxwell dear. Promise me you'll keep away from the hoodlum boy and his awful friends. Nobody got hurt this time, but I shudder to think what might have happened." And Grim, bless his pointed little head, he goes, "Maxwell can handle himself, can't you, Max?" "Right, Max, not son, which is okay by me." "I can run," I say to Graham. "I see Tony D, that's what I'll do." "Good boy," Graham says. I thought, because you're so much bigger than he is, well, you just do that, dear. You run away. "He's not running away," Grim says, real impatient. "He's taking evasive action, avoiding a confrontation. That's a very different thing, right, Max?" I nod and drink my coffee without slurping, and decide it's better not to mention that Tony D carries a knife, and he's probably got guns, too, because then Graham would only worry, and she's such a clunker when she's worried. Like I said, it turns out to be a pretty cool summer. Usually what I do is just hang around and look at my comic books and watch the tube, or go shopping with Graham if she really makes a fuss. I hate the beach because the beach is stupid, the cool crowd looking sleek and tanned, and aren't we gorgeous? And because if you saw me lying on a blanket, you'd go, "Hey, why is that albino walrus wearing sunglasses?" So mostly I just vegetate in the basement and pick my navel, to quote Grimm, Mr. Bellybutton Lint himself. But Freak changes all that. Each and every morning the little dude humps himself over and bangs on the bulkhead, wonka wonka wonka. He may be small, but he sure is noisy. "Get out of bed, you lazy beast. There are fair maidens to rescue, dragons to slay." Which is what he says every single morning. Exactly the same thing, until it's like he's this alarm clock, and as soon as I hear the wonka 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 of him beating the bulkhead, I know what's coming next. Fair maidens and dragons and Freak with that wake up the world grin of his going, "Hurry up with the cereal. How can you eat that much, you big ox? Come on, let's do something." He's so full of ever-ready energy you can practically hear his brain humming, and he never can sit still. "Ants in the pants," I say one morning when he's ready to yank the cereal bowl off the table. He's in such a hurry to do something, and he goes, "What?" And I go, "You must have ants in your pants." And he gets this funny look, and he goes, "That's the fair Gwen always says. Did she tell you to say that?" And I shake my head and finish the cereal real slow, and Freak goes, "For your information, there are 2,247 known subspecies of hymenopteran insects. Latin name, Formicidae, and none of them are in my pants." Which cracks me up, even though I don't understand a word he's saying. "I propose a quest," he says. "We shall journey far to the east and see what lies there." By now I know what a quest is because Freak has explained the whole deal. How it started with King Arthur trying to keep all his knights busy by making them do things that proved how strong and brave and smart they were. Or sometimes how totally numb, because how else can you explain dudes running around inside big clunky tin cans and praying all the time? Which I don't mention to Freak because he's very sensitive about knights and quests and secret meanings. Like how a dragon isn't really just a big slimy fire-breathing monster. It's a symbol of nature or something. A dragon is sphere of the natural world, Freak says, an archetype of the unknown. I go, "What's an archetype?" And Freak sighs and shakes his head and reaches into his knapsack for his dictionary. This is true. He really does keep a dictionary in his knapsack. It's his favorite book, and he pulls it out like Arnold Schwarzenegger pulling out a machine gun or something. That's the fierce look he gets with the book in his hands. "Go on," he says, making me take the book. "Look it up." And now I wish I hadn't said anything about this archetype dude because I hate looking up stuff in his stupid dictionary. "Start with A," he says. "I know that." "A-R," he says. "Just go along the A's until you come to A-R." Yeah, right. Easy for a genius to use the dictionary since he already knows how to spell the words. And R's never look like backward E's to Freak, which is the way they look to me sometimes, unless I really squint and think about it. "Careful," he says. "You'll bite off your tongue and then we'll have to waste the day at the emergency room getting it reattached. Microsurgery is such a bore. Didn't anybody ever tell you that?" "Huh?" I say. But I do close my mouth so my tongue doesn't stick out. I'm still looking in the dictionary for archetype, and I'm looking for words that are underlined with red ink, because that's what Freak does the first time he looks up a word. He makes a line under it, and you'd be amazed how many are underlined. There are whole pages like that, where he's looked up every single word. Finally, he spells out all the letters for me, and I find the stupid word. "There's nothing about dragons here," I say, squinting hard at the stuff under the word. "It just says pattern. So what is it, a sewing type of thing?" Freak has this disgusted look, and he takes the dictionary and he goes, "You're hopeless. Pattern is the first definition. I was referring to the second definition, which is much more interesting. A universal symbol or idea in the psyche, expressed in dreams or dreamlike images." Like that helps, right? I'm getting bored with the dictionary, so I pretend to understand, and Freak finally gives up and he shakes his head and goes, "I don't know why I bother. Dinosaurs had brains the size of peanuts, and they ruled the earth for 100 million years. Okay, so that's the end of Chapter 8. So I want you guys to go to Google Classroom, and I would like you to take the Chapters 5 through 8 quiz. If you don't know exactly what happened in this chapter, you may need to reread the PDF that is on Google Classroom, or you can listen to me reading again. All right, and if you have any questions, please email me. My email is at the top of your Google Classroom. Have a great day.